Alright guys, just a quick one here. So the video I just released on no such thing as an overnight success. Now a lot of that was talking about my career. Now I originally was going to make a separate video on how I got to this point, but what I think I might do is I'll hold off on that video for now because I think it's a little bit too soon to make sort of two, I guess, career story related videos back to back. But what I will do real quick is I'll give some practical quick takeaways for you guys to apply to your situation. So my first point would be to keep going. Sounds very cliche and cheesy, but keep going. If I made it with my handicaps and setbacks, you can too. Alright, I'm not sure why those audio recordings are a bit quieter than this one, but nonetheless, we'll crack on. So my next point is to do extra study. Get ahead. The best investment you can make is in yourself. Now, there's no substitute for experience. So experience is better than studying and educational qualifications for the most part. However, studying is better than nothing at all because it'll show your employer that you actually care. Now, obviously, this study has to be related to your actual career path. Like if I'm doing accounting, there's no point in me doing some real quick, short, like nursing course, you know what I mean? It's got to be actually relevant to your field. Not only will this give you extra resume credit, which means you're more likely to be called in for a job interview, which is one of the hardest steps in the whole job process, but it could possibly be something that your employer has to teach their new employees, but now you've actually gone out and learnt it yourself, which means that they won't need to spend as much time training you. Now, this can either result in, one, you're more likely to get hired because they know they don't have to invest as much time into you, or two, you can actually start off at a higher salary because instead of them training you to a point where you're more valuable to the business, which means they are willing to pay you more, you already have this knowledge, so you can start off your career or start off this job at a higher salary, which, no one's complaining about that now, are they? Like, for example, if you spend $1,000 in educational qualifications, and as a result, you can now start off on $45,000 instead of $40,000, well, that's a 5x return on your money. And not only that, it's probably an even higher return when you factor in how no one else is really putting in that kind of work. And because you've started off on a higher salary, any salary jumps you get from now on will be exponentially more than your peers who don't have this extra education. So to sum up point two, do extra study. It's the best investment you can make. Tip number three is to do some extra unpaid experience, which can include things like unpaid internships or executive positions at university clubs. Now, getting an internship is a little bit trickier than you'd think, especially considering they're unpaid. Like, if you don't get it, then you still rock up. Like, what are they going to do? Pay you? So, anyway, that is an option, but I found a really underrated option is to get executive positions at university clubs. So when you sign up to university, I imagine it's the same as college in the States. So for those of you who don't know, university is like past high school, and that's what they call it here in Australia. So at the, I guess, orientation week, they have a bunch of like stalls, and they'll have this around the campus at your university, and it's just a bunch of university clubs. Now, what you can do is you can sign up to these and actively be involved whenever they have some sort of event or meeting or whatever. Now, each of these clubs will have their own roles. Like most of them will have like a treasurer who deals with the money, a secretary who does like a lot of the correspondence stuff, the vice president, the president who's like in charge of the whole thing, and then a bunch of other numerous roles. Now, this can be extremely valuable for your resume because a lot of the work you'll do here is kind of scaled down work of the type of stuff you do in the real world. And these are surprisingly easy to get. So for my instance, I did a Bachelor of Commerce, and at my university they had like a commerce society or something. They called it something along those lines. Now, a lot of other commerce students signed up to this, and because you had so many other members in the club, it was a lot harder to get executive positions because obviously only one person can get it and a lot of people are gunning for it. But I'd sign up to those clubs anyway. Try and go for these smaller clubs with less competition. So the club I became a secretary for, like I wanted treasurer, but that was taken. So that's fine. Secretary is also good resume experience, as well as president, vice president, and all that. But the resume credit at the end of the day is still very similar, and employers will still definitely look at this on your resume. Now, admittedly, at most interviews I went to, they didn't actually ask many questions about this particular role I had, but keep in mind that I also had experience at an actual firm, and I had experience as an intern at their tax office. So that was probably where their focus lied. I was also doing little extra things like a Microsoft Excel course, which, if you look at most accounting jobs, they'll have something like proficient in Excel as one of the job descriptions, like as one of the, I guess, preferred traits, however you want to say it. The point is, they look for stuff like this. So, yeah, in my instance, they didn't really ask too much about this, but it's also a good springboard to answer potential job interview questions. So they didn't ask specifically about my role as a secretary at the uni club, but I drew on my experiences from there to answer some job interview questions. Now, I did a video a while back on how to pass job interviews, and I did it with a crappier mic, and I didn't really know how to talk into the microphone back then, so it's kind of iffy quality. I'll probably do an updated one eventually, but at some point in the video, I draw on some experience that I had as a secretary at a uni club. And the idea behind that was the question, like the scenario was so broad that it would have covered almost any behavioral type question that they could ask. Now, if that all sounds like gibberish to you, I won't elaborate here just because I was trying to make this video short, but I think it's already at least 5 minutes at this point. But go check out that video if you want more info on that. But the point I was getting at was it's definitely going to help your career, whether it gets you more job interviews because it's extra stuff on your resume, whether it's transferable skills to your relevant career role, or whether it's something you can draw on to answer job interview questions. It certainly doesn't help, and it doesn't really eat up much of your time either. Like, it's not going to be like a 10-hour commitment per week or something. It's maybe just a night here and there, maybe, depending on what you do. And even then, usually your university club's pretty chill and others can pick up the slack for you. And usually they won't schedule major events and, I guess, admin heavy tasks around like your exams and whatnot. That was my experience anyway. It might be different for other clubs, but I guess if you find a club with a crappy culture like that, you can always just move to another one. So to wrap up point 3, do some of the extra unpaid work because it's experience and that's invaluable when it comes to this sort of stuff. Tip number 4, pick a career that has projected job growth according to your government website. So I'd mentioned this in previous videos before, but go onto government websites and type in something like job growth projection or job outlook and find all of the jobs that the government projects that are in demand, because the government will eventually fund these in one way or another, or at the very least they won't cut back on spending in those particular sectors. Because if the government stops funding your, I guess, career and they just don't feel there's a need for it, well, eventually there's going to be no jobs for it. So some examples in Australia at least are accounting, nursing, engineering, IT, teaching, just to name a few. Like, there is definitely others. I think aged care is another one. But the ultimate point is pick something that there's actually going to be job growth in. And last tip, this is more so after you've actually sort of gotten your career up and running, but the best way to get a pay rise is to switch jobs. Now, like, I don't plan on leaving my current job or anything. My job's great. But if I was trying to go from my salary of about 56,000 to 70,000, it would probably take quite a while and a lot of negotiating to get to that point. Whereas it would honestly be easier if I stuck at this job for 5 years, got experience, got my CPA, and then moved to another job and started off on 70,000. Now, negotiating a higher salary at another job is another story in its own right. But the ultimate point is the best way to get a pay rise is to switch jobs. So I hope those were some useful tips. And if you watched the previous video, you know that I know what I'm talking about because I've been through the mud when it came to my career. Like, I've been through all the ups and downs. So trust me, this advice does work. And even if you just look at other sources of information, you'll find that they will be saying pretty similar stuff. And above all, I hope this has been some refreshing content because I know that a lot of people on YouTube talk about how to grow a business or whatever, but a lot of people don't really talk about career. I know some people just don't really like their jobs and they just don't want a boss. But for those of you who do actually like this sort of lifestyle, like, I really don't mind the whole 9 to 5 life, especially because I like the work I do and I work for a company that doesn't have dog shit culture. And a general 9 to 5 job, or even just a part-time job for that matter, they are more stable than your general business. And you're more likely to actually get a part-time job and a full-time job in Korea as opposed to a business anyway. Now, this will be another topic on its own right, but there's a lot more money to be made when you run your own business as opposed to your regular jobs. But the likelihood of you getting to that point is a lot lower than what it would be if you had just stuck to a normal 9 to 5 career or whatever, not even just 9 to 5. Like, I know nurses don't really work 9 to 5, they work all hours of the day and night. Point is, this video is for those of you who are looking at going down that general employee route. So, hope it helps. That is all.